Oh, here we are back again, and for another half hour or so. A lovely experience at the moment because the gentleman who looks after the hanging baskets at the Black Horse has turned up, and he's got all sorts of baskets with flowers in them, and he's busy hanging them and I'm able to watch. And it's a very pleasant experience. Not everybody can sit at their work desk and have somebody waving baskets of flowers under their nose. No, indeed. Well, what I think that we're going to do is we are going to have a little tipple first. So here we go with a mid-morning drink. Oh, wonderful idea. Just the one, Miss Eddie. Just the one. She didn't want me to introduce this program at all, but I fought for it, and here I am. Just the one, Miss Eddie. Our drinks program that will cover the spirits, the wine, and the beer industries, not only locally, but throughout the world. Oh, joy.
You can give it back to me now. Come on. Thank you.
In fact, have a tipple. I need a drink. Evil spirits are brewed in Lewis. Here we go again. Pubs in Lewis. I feel like a drink. Why did Lewis have so many pubs? 63? 63 pubs. Oh my goodness. I think I will pop in for a quick drink. Lewis, drinking I come. Meanwhile, where's that pint? Vroom, vroom. So, it turned into a pub. They sure tippled in Lewis in the past. Time, gentlemen, please. One of the beauties of living in this part of the world is we have lots and lots of breweries, macro, micro, and somewhere in between. Oh, and boy, do they turn out an enjoyable product. See what I mean in a moment?
The main ingredients in any beer are water, malted grains, hops, and yeast. Hops are the flowers of the hop plant, which are used for flavoring. The only other uses for hops are in herbal medicine. With these four ingredients, you have everything you need to make beer, but the combinations in processes make all the difference. All of these ingredients are boiled together for set amounts of time until the final mixture is filtered and sent to fermentation. Mineral contents in your water source can make a huge difference to the type of beer that you brew.
For our bachelor's level students who are taking a class called The Art and Science of Brewing, take that malted barley, put it into our mill and crack it open to expose that starch inside. We're going to start with around 500 pounds of grain, which gives us about anywhere from 8 to 12 bags of grain. From there it goes up through our auger and into the grist case and turn it into sugar. And that process can take anywhere from 45 minutes to 2.5 hours. Assurance and quality control testing we do, looking at sugar contents, which we call gravity, looking at our yeast under a microscope to try and count yeast cells that are healthy.
history of the English inns or pubs is fascinating. So the next programme, courtesy of the British Council, takes us through the history of the English inn. And then, just to finish it off, what pubs recently were like just before lockdown. They've suffered a bit since, but this is a story of a long tale into a pub and an inn. Join me.
Flanked by the church, the rectory, and the people's homes, stands the inn. In its shade and beneath its roof, men of all degrees and of all opinions meet in comradeship and comfort. Walk through any English market town and you'll find the inn at the centre of its life. On market day, the people from the country around meet there to discuss the trend of prices, their children's health and their home affairs. It's the same in the villages. When the sun warms the earth, they sit outside and watch the world go by. At the English inn today, there is a hospitality that to the host is just as much a sacred charge as it was to the monks and barons in the Middle Ages, who first gave bread and ale to travellers. Often the only sanctuary in out-of-the-way parts, the monasteries had a lodge open to pilgrims and other wayfarers. Later, these lodges became separate establishments and were eventually run as inns, under such signs as the Pilgrim's Inn. One example of monastic origin is the Bull, which gets its name from the papal bull, or bill, not the animal. These inns of England have seen history happen in their yards. Pilgrims and warriors have trodden their stairways. Here, medieval knights refreshed themselves on their journeys to the Crusades, to fight under the banner of St. George. The inns have preserved much of England's architecture. The early inn has preserved some of the finest carvings and treasures. Like the church, it was a sanctuary. Hence, most of these carvings have a religious meaning.
Over the road from the shops, held up by ship's timbers, is the Gardener's Arms. There seems to be a tradition in Lewes, although no one admits to it, of omitting the epithet pub or tavern. This pub is called by locals simply the Gardener's. And the Gardener's it was. The origins of this pub go back to when it was an ordinary house, owned by a gardener. Often, after work, he would invite other gardeners into his front room for a drink. Eventually, it made sense to formalize the ritual. So it turned into a pub. The Gardener's is a true pub. Unusual now, it only serves pork pies and sausage rolls. Yet each year it's in the top tier of finalists for Pub of the Year. Stood proudly on the riverbanks. Harvey's Brewery, the key industry of the town. The bloody high street of a tiny town.
old man would give up pubs for Lent or something, wouldn't you? Well, think on. He even gets absorbed in how the pubs were in January's time. Luddite.
The Romans started the wine industry in this part of the world, and very fine wine they made indeed. During the First World War, the British government almost killed it because they needed sugar and other things needed to grow vines for the war effort. And I'm happy to say that vineyards now are flourishing, and I've visited a lot of them. I hope that over the next few weeks you'll come with me.
English sparkling wines are beginning to win an enviable reputation across the globe, and that reputation is turning into sales. British supermarket chain Waitrose has reported a 188% increase in sales of English sparkling wine last year, and that trend is expected to continue. The soil and climatic conditions in southern England are remarkably similar to those of the Champagne region in France. So much so that leading French champagne house Taittinger has bought land in Kent and has begun producing English sparkling wine. But the owners of English vineyards are not prepared to take second place. Ridgeview Estate Wines in Ditchling has been producing English sparkling wine since 1994. And recently, the company received the prestigious accolade of having its wine served by the Queen to Chinese Premier Xi Jinping at a state dinner. Ridgeview is a family business which has a strong sense of history when it comes to its products. The vineyard's trademark is Merit, named in honour of Englishman Christopher Merit. This wine pioneer made a presentation to the Royal Society in London in 1662, explaining the process of making sparkling wines. That was 30 years before the French began producing champagne. Last year, Ridgeview produced a bumper crop and has similar ambitions for this year. The product can be seen at a variety of produce events in the region, notably Brighton and Hove's Food and Drink Fair in May. And the winemaker plans to repeat the success of last year when it introduced its range of sparkling wines to New Yorkers. Want to check out the claims that Ridgeview makes? There are plenty of stockists within the Lewes district. As one might suspect, it's available at Harvey's, but also Larder in Ditchling, Middle Farm on the road to Eastbourne, and of course the English Wine Centre at Drusilla's Roundabout. These successes have created a rush to develop new vineyards in Sussex. Licence applications last year were up by 40%. It's not just sparkling wines that are gaining a reputation. Still wines have also been around a long time. Both are now beginning to take the French market by storm, as demonstrated by the French purchase of acreage in Kent. The key question now is if growth will mean a larger and more expansive English wine industry, or a homegrown luxury product suitable for big and glittering occasions. For the moment, only time will tell. Tasting a true competitor of French champagne. So next up on Food Glorious Food, a new way to sell wines in Lewes. Symposium has a friendly, laid-back atmosphere with staff who clearly have a passion for wine. Symposium has a limited range of Sussex wines, but what they have is top draw, and its range of quality grape types is within most budgets. Whether it's the cheese and meat platter, a single malt scotch, crunchy local bread or a glass or two of decent claret, this wine bar has found a unique way to sell its wines. And in today's world of big is better, the Symposium has found its niche.
Well, there we are. It's a little trip of history for the pubs. A couple of places in Lewes where you can get a decent glass of wine. Symposium is still going; it's still there, and very nice place it is, and very nice young men who run it. And the Ridgeway Vineyard is still supplying top wine, still one of the leading wine producers in this part of the planet, actually. So an industry that is alive and well. And doing all right, as they say. It's just wonder whether we, what else we might have to take a look at, because it is still only 20 to 10, and do you know something that's there is a lot of chat still about food banks, and we did a program about a food bank way back in 2020. And it's fascinating the way that some of these things are thought up. So let's just go back to that interview about food banks, and just as a reminder. Well, he said, hopefully. Well, it doesn't seem to want to think that that's it.
My name's Mark Perryman. I've lived in Lewes for about a decade. I'd never really been involved in, I guess, what people would call community campaigning before. I'd always been interested in politics, making a difference, but the coronavirus crisis made me want to do something. And I've kind of been an event organiser since I was a student. So I've got a kind of organisational mind. And I came up with this idea of an all-day food bank collection, which we started at Waitrose on Easter Saturday. And it really grew from there. We started off at one supermarket, and then I contacted the cricket club, Lewes Priory Cricket Club, and I said to Peter, I said, would you come in your whites? He said, yeah, we're coming on whites. Well, they turned up outside Waitrose in whites, pads, padded gloves, helmet, visors down. And so everybody who was going to Waitrose knew that Lewes Priory Cricket Club cared about food poverty, and that's what switched in my mind. I thought, why don't we create not a kind of coalition which is like a committee, but a public and visual coalition. So on our Saturdays, we have 9 sports clubs, 7 bonfire societies, 4 churches, 3 political parties, bands, musicians, artists, poets, keep fit fanatics, chefs, a yoga group, a book group, through the whole day. And we've expanded across all 3 supermarkets, Aldi, Tesco's and Waitrose. It's an extraordinary visual coalition of a town that cares. And also, we're saying food poverty exists in this town, in this wonderful town of ours. there is food poverty, and that stretches to childhood malnutrition. Of course, we shouldn't have to do something about this. We're the sixth richest economy in the world, for goodness sake. We shouldn't have to have food bank. And this is where I get quite emotional. In '84, I was out collecting tins of food for striking miners. And when people say, sorry, I always well up at this, when people say, what are you doing this for? I say, because now we're having to collect food for our neighbours. You know, that's the state that we're in. Obviously, that's been created by the coronavirus crisis, but don't go away with the impression it's going to get any better next year, because then there will be the redundancies and the mass unemployment. And so this is a desperate need, and of course we shouldn't need to have to collect for food banks. But in the here and now, you know, I wanted to stop people being starved back to work. I want to stop people having to starve through Christmas. So, and we're making a difference. We're making a massive difference in this town. We enter each item of food that's been collected. The food bank gives us a list of 24 items they need. So we're not only collecting quantity, it's quality. So we can lift people's morale and lift their health as well. Then we have a very complicated system of delivery to 3 different food banks, Lamport, Mallings and Fitzjohn's, all through the day. Some of them have different needs to others. What we do is we ensure that each food bank gets a third from Tesco's, a third from Aldi, a third from Waitrose. People start by going out on their Saturday shop, and we ask them to add 1 item to their shopping list. Lots of people are generous and they add considerably more, but all we're asking is for 1 item, and that adds up to 5,661 items by the end of the day. And then we have our secret shoppers. We will raise something in the region of £700 through donations. People who can't come out on the day, can't help, they're not shopping, they'd like us to collect something. Our secret shoppers go into the supermarket, and because we've recorded everything that's been donated, we see, oh, we're a bit short of coffee, we're a bit short of bars of chocolate, we're a bit short of cereals, and we bump that up. Lewes is a town full of sounds, isn't it? We've got 13 choirs, we've got brass bands, we've got ska, we've got folk, we've got 7 panto casts. They're going to be there collecting, and they're going to be singing, he's behind you, no he's not, yes he is, you know, there'll be all of that. And it's another symbol of a town coming together. We will be socially distanced, we will be wearing masks and visors, and we'll be keeping back, but just to remind people that, you know, the spirit of Christmas is needed more than ever.
Well, that was just a little a bit down memory lane of since we're on a food theme this morning, and I know that the Peter Pan is lurking, so hopefully he will join me in a minute or two, and we can have a little chat. And that does remind you of Christmas, doesn't it? Which is probably what we're just about as far from Christmas now as we can get. So it's a countdown to Christmas that starts for the 6 months. A nice time of year, but this is a nice time of year too, and we're getting a half decent bit of sunshine this morning. There's puffy cloud there. There's a little bit of a breeze, but all in all, it's not bad. Philip was a bit poorly the other day, but I have to say I don't think, no, I most certainly have not reported on my visit to Littlehampton. First of all, let me tell you about the journey down, because the Red Devil has not been fixed yet. There's some more chasing to be done today. And so I decided that I was not going to abandon the lunch, which I was scheduled to have with Philip, and also with John Prideaux, who is artificial intelligence expert, and who appears every other Wednesday to fill things in for us. I opted to do a very wobbly on my walking stick and have that as the only support. So I interviewed James McCleary that morning in the Black Horse, and a very good interview it was too. And it certainly has had very wide distribution. I've had a lot of reaction from it, and they're very interested in James. I then had a taxi from George and Mildred as GM Taxis, which is the little taxi company that is opposite the station. If you ever need a taxi down there, a very good company. And George and Mildred, they got their name because way back in 1997, we had the first independent media radio station here, the forerunner of rocket radio, and it was called Radio Caburn. And we actually approached GM taxis and said, would their drivers keep us apprised of what's going on in the traffic? So they became our traffic reporters. And so I've called them George and Mildred, G&M, ever since. And whenever I phone, I say, hello, George and Mildred, so they know who it is. But anyway, a George and Mildred taxi was standing by, and at bang on 10 o'clock, whipped me down to the train station. I went to buy my ticket, and there was a lovely lady who's been there for quite some time. But I actually was there when I was commuting. I was there when on her first day, and suffered with her through her learning curve. And we sort of said hello to one another whenever I go through the station. But anyway, she asked how I was, and I said, well, my Parkinson's plays up a bit. So she immediately organized for somebody to come from the platform up to the booking hall and to escort me down onto the platform. And he stayed with me until the train came in and had a word with the conductor, who then phoned through to Brighton. They met me on Brighton station and escorted me from platform 8, where the Lewis train comes in, over to platform 2, where the train left for Littlehampton. It sat me down and made sure that I was okay. I got a few minutes to wait. I had a cup of coffee. And then another gentleman came, and he saw me into the Littlehampton train, made sure I was okay, alerted the conductor to the fact that I was there and needed a little bit of keeping an eye on. They helped me off at Littlehampton, where Philip was on the platform. We walked out, and it wasn't a very long walk. I staggered along to a pub called the Arun View, and it overlooks the River Arun, which flows through Littlehampton. And we sat down and had a drink. John Prideaux was already there, and happily the lunch was excellent food. The Arun is it is a bit different to the Black Horse. It started to leave a bit of its pub roots behind, and has become a pub restaurant rather than a pub that serves food. but still very pleasant. Staff very nice. We had a lovely lunch. I had some nice fish and chips and some ice cream. It was plentiful in terms of the portions, and I normally have to have quite a small one because my appetite is not all that it was. And I had I tucked into the fish and chips, and indeed they were. It was sufficiently good that I ate 3/4 of the portion, and I had 2 huge scoops of ice cream. So well satisfied I was. I was given a beer to start off with, and a couple of glasses of red wine. All in all, a very replete lunch. I was driven back. John Prideaux drove me back to the station. Philip saw me onto the platform, got me seated. The train came in. I got on board. Once again, the conductor was keeping an eye on me, and I this time had to change at Hove. That was probably the weakest part of the journey because it's just a little commuter ride from Hove Station into Brighton. There was nobody on the station at Hove, but I'd been deposited by the train before onto a seat right in the centre of the platform, and I was perfectly happy sitting there. There's a very nice lady conductor, and I said to her, could she please organise something for me to get from platform 2 to platform 8 once we arrived in Brighton, which she did. A gentleman turned up, this time with a wheelchair. So they put me in the wheelchair, wheeled me across to platform 8, got me on board, let the conductor know that I was there and to keep an eye on me. And they called through to Lewis. I got off at Lewis with some help. And there were a couple of guys who, once again, I knew from my days as commuter. As I had a nice, happy chat, I was escorted up to the booking hall, went across to George and Mildred, who said, "Oh dear, I haven't got a taxi for a good 3/4 of an hour." I thought, that's okay. I'll wait. But she immediately got on, called around the various taxi drivers and found one who had got a brief 5 minutes between his fares. He came, picked me up, wheeled me back to Clevedown, and there I was back in the bosom of my own little apartment, and I'd been looked after pillar to post all the way down to Littlehampton, all the way back while I was there. And what a pleasant experience it was. Now, Philip, if you're watching, I hope that you're going to join me. And I was just explaining to people what a lovely day out I had last Friday. But I thought, strangely enough, sometimes you have a stroke of fortune, because on my way over from platform 8 to platform 2, the man escorting me stopped to have a chat to a suit. And tongue in cheek, I said to him, "Do you own this railway?" And he grinned and he said, "Well, no, but I am the general manager of this area." So I said, "Oh, great. I was able to tell you that your staff have been absolutely first class. Have just looked after me in a most marvelous way, and that I will actually report back on Mirador television about this very pleasant experience." So I can't say that I was out of touch with anybody who wasn't very kind. Deck was here when I got here at Friday morning, and Deck always looks after me. He is a most marvelous host at the Black Horse. He made sure I got into the taxi okay, and that I needed for nothing. And off I set. So the taxi company, thank you, George and Mildred. The train company, thank you, Southern. The restaurant pub in Littlehampton is the Arran View. Thank you, Arran View. Very, very nice. And the train company was the same thing as Southern on the way back. Thank you, a double thank you. And George and Mildred for getting me home again. So all is not lost in terms of service in the service industry. I was treated royally. One slight note, if you like, is I am very enamored of the lady Judith Durham, who was the lead singer in the Seekers, and Philip called over a lovely young waitress, and I was able to look at her, and she was the spitting image of Judith Durham when she was younger. And I was able to say, gosh, are you a singer? But then, Philip accuses me of being a flirt. But boy, he took over and he charmed this lady into coming back to the table several times. And I was left in his wake. So he hasn't lost his skill. Good morning, Philip.
Well, good morning. You pay me a great compliment. She was lovely, wasn't she?
She was.
The lady from the love. It's an alliteration. The lovely lady from Latvia.
Yes.
That's where right. She was from. Is that a country you've ever visited, Keith?
Yes, I've been to Riga. Yes. I spent some considerable time in the Baltics, but mostly in Lithuania, and only a brief 2 or 3 times in Riga, in Latvia. But on one occasion, I was leaving Lithuania, and there was a strike on behalf of an airline, and so they had to use the Latvian airline to fill in. So I did land once more in Riga. But the old town in Riga is really very, very nice.
I'm sure it is. I mean, my daughter Jessica has been to Estonia. I don't think she went to Latvia. Well, I'm glad you've been waxing lyrical about how you were looked after last Friday. And
what a very, very lovely day it was. Somebody just peered through the door. I've got to go and be dormant. Can you keep talking for about 2 minutes?
Yes, of course. I can talk about anything. But if, dear viewer and listener, you have been hearing Keith describe his day last Friday, as the host with the most, it was very enjoyable. And what made it even better was that my neighbour and friend John Prideaux, who does a fortnightly show on Mirador with me every Wednesday fortnight at 9 o'clock, or from 9 o'clock, he was able to come as well. And actually, without him, things would have been really very difficult, because Keith's Red Devil mobility scooter had broken down. So to my surprise and to an extent shock, he had travelled just with a walking stick
Well, the thing is, if they're not here,
so when he got off the train just with a walking stick, instead of the scooter, it worried me that we could get into the area, the pub restaurant. Well, to his credit, he wasn't proud. He hooked arms with me, and we walked slowly but surely to the Arran View, where, as he's told you, they made us very welcome, as they always do. One of my best friend's sons, Calvin Cobby, is a chef there. I don't know whether he was on that day, but we were very well attended. It wasn't just the lovely lady from Latvia, there were other lovely ladies as well. And Mr. Keith Hayes had a very definite and noticeable twinkle in his eye throughout the lunch. It wasn't just the food. He made a very, very good fist of the food. It worried me because he's always said that he normally has like a child's portion because his appetite isn't what it used to be. Well, he did very, very well because the portions of the fish and chips there are pretty substantial. And then, hoping to save my money, I said, "You don't want a dessert, do you, Keith?" He goes, "Yes, I do." "Yes, I do. I want 2 scoops of ice cream."
You can't take me anywhere.
So, with great reluctance, I forked out for these 2 massive balls of ice cream that he just chomped away at. Put it this way, it's rare that I have a dessert, viewer, but I had one of these. I had 1 scoop. And I am normally a very fast eater, far too fast for polite society. He had finished his 2 scoops before I got near finishing my 1. Put it that way. So he left well nourished, replete, as he said, and we were given a cheery goodbye from all the lovely ladies. And because John Prideaux, as I said, was there with his Tesla, I've got to mention he drives a Tesla. He's a complete show-off with it, of course. So he drove Keith and me to the station, which was a great help, Keith, wasn't it?
It was.
I was allowed through the barrier with the geriatric who was with me. So I sat him down on the seats to wait for the train, and the train came in. And he's told you the rest of the story, because I had to go back and get a lift back with John at the drop-off point. So yeah, it was a very, very fine day indeed. In stark contrast, on the Sunday, I was taken out, as was my wife, for lunch by a very dear friend, a lady who's now a widow, the godmother to our youngest child, our youngest son Oliver, to lunch in a local restaurant of my choice, as a belated birthday gift, which was very lovely of her. Well, I don't know, and I've written a letter of complaint actually. I won't say who it is or what it is, but the food, quality of food was very, very poor. And most of it was sent back. There was very little gesture from the staff on the day to make up for that. I mean, I'll give you an example. We ordered coffees, and my hostess ordered an Americano. And when they were delivered, the waitress said that, well, you know, to make up for your complaints, there was no concession by them that it was rubbish. We won't charge you for the coffees. Well, the irony of that is, that the coffee that they served my hostess, which was meant to be Americano, was tepid and too strong. So the refunded coffee for our hostess was undrinkable for her, which rather summed up the day.
How disappointing after such a great day on Friday. Yeah.
Yes, it was disappointing. I hadn't personally eaten there for about 18 months, but it was a different experience, let's just put it that way. What was I going to say? Yes, it just was a shame. The food I ate what was meant to be a lasagna, which was, frankly, just a disgusting slop. Nothing like what a proper lasagna should be. A proper lasagna, Keith, as you will agree, is a lovely layered, firm dish. This was just slop. And God knows what they put in it, because I was so unwell with it into yesterday, and that's why you didn't see me on TV. I felt so ill and so regular a visitor to the WC that it bit me back twice. So it was a very disappointing. And in my letter of complaint, I pointed out that it was extremely hard to watch my hostess fork out for this meal. But we didn't make a massive fuss at the time, because I didn't want her to think we were having a bad time, because she was the hostess. So it was a catch-22, really. And even now, she doesn't know that I've complained. Not that I'll get a response. I'm confident I won't get a response. But it was, yes, it couldn't have been more different than the Friday, actually.
That's very sad. Are. Very sad, yes.
Today's Tuesday. We move on.
Yes. If I can go back to Friday for something different, you and John and I had a chat about Mirador television, as indeed one would expect, particularly with me there. And one of the things that we talked about was being able to create slightly different programs with the help of artificial, I always want to say insemination, artificial intelligence. And I have since then, what we discussed was, because Lewis is very historical, and it was given its charter in 800 by Alfred, that I would like to see a drama. One, John is working on a moving figures of monks, because we decided on a detective monk. The other I said was the day-to-day activity in 800, as discovered by AI, in a pub. And I've now got 3 scenarios of some people in a pub talking, in pub talk. One about what Alfred's policies, the sort of thing that you talk about in a pub here, government. One about crime, and one with a traveller who's come from afar and is relating his experiences. Because in those days, of course, the only way that you got any news was by people coming into town.
Yes.
They'll need some tampering with, but I've got almost a half-hour script for our first episode. So I'm going to get John to look at what moving figures we can get. And maybe that we out of that lunch will come the very first episode of Mirador's pub of Lewis in 800. I've even got a name for it. I think it's called the Saxon something Inn, and he's given the pub landlord a name. So that was another thing that came out of Friday's lunch.
Yes, I remember that part of the conversation. You were on very good form. You were waxing lyrical, and the thing was, John was actually interested, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
All I will say is we have to remember with JP that he is still a working man.
Oh yes, I mean it is something that we can do in downtime. There's no pressure on it to do it.
But he will do it. I mean, he will do it because it interests him. And there's that level of amusement to it as well. You know, the Red Devil, the Triffid, the Man in the Hat, all that. It's he clearly he uses his own sense of humour in producing these things. So yeah, we'll get that done. We'll get that done.
Yes. Well, it would be interesting if I mean I sent you, by the way, the reaction to Harry and I yesterday. I don't know whether you got it or whether you read it.
No, I've had no email or text from you. I haven't received anything from you, Keith.
Well, isn't that strange? I will right after this program. I will resend because we had a very nice email. I don't know who from, but it said, I watched you and Harry, and I was totally intrigued, and you're better informed, and you had better analysis than the BBC.
Well, that's just what you want to hear.
Indeed. Yes. It worries me a little that you haven't received that. I worry that email isn't as reliable as it used to be.
Was it an email?
Yes, it was email.
Right, let me just check my junk folder. Yeah, see, for some reason it's gone into junk.
Yes, I know. I don't know why. Sometimes it sends your stuff into junk, even though you're on the preferred list. But still, there we are. These things happen.
Yeah, I've got the email sent to you, but it doesn't identify the person.
No. I don't know who it's from. Which makes it even better because it's not somebody trying to say, I'm watching Old Pal.
Yeah, and then there's one about the closing down for the holidays.
Yes.
From you. So yes, I've got them. It's just that they've gone into junk.
Right.
So there we are. I've read them now. Now, isn't Kit coming on today?
Kit should be here at about anywhere in the next 10 or 15 minutes, I would have thought.
Right, good, okay.
But yeah, you might like to comment on the reaction that you're getting to this last couple of days of campaigning.
The reaction I'm getting?
Yes. I mean, when you're seeing the media and talking to people, what is the what's your feeling in this last couple of days?
I see what you mean. I thought you meant
any shift.
There'll be no shift in this constituency. I'm afraid I'm about as useful on this subject at the moment as a chocolate teapot because I've deliberately not watched the news, even on the BBC website, which normally is my food and drink, because I'm just frankly sick and tired of all the politics and also the violence that's going on in the West Bank and in Ukraine, and the antics of Putin and the antics of Trump, who's now managed to get the Supreme Court on his side, which is, together with Biden's semi-senile performances, is another great worry. I think I mentioned some weeks ago, or no, some programs ago, that a statistic I read was that nearly 50% of people polled said that they no longer watch or read the news anymore.
Yes, it is interesting, isn't it?
It wasn't 50%, it was approaching 45%, because they're just sick of it. It's just so bloody depressing. And I think people feel helpless, don't they?
Yes, they do. And I think that we just have a very, very poor standard of a politician at the moment. The Badenoch was quoted as saying, I wish people like Farage would stay out of politics because they are lightweight. They don't understand the way that we politicians understand how it works. We politicians, the people who are supposed to know, have made such a cock up of it, and it's so bad. How they have it just shows how unaware they are.
No, you see that
they're having.
Exactly. They're in their own bubble.
Yeah.
Which is called the House of Commons. What I did here, because I listen, as I think you know, to Radio 3 all the time, they have half-hourly bulletins throughout the breakfast programme. So that's what I catch up on, the radio. And you will either have read or heard or shared, even with the viewer or the listener, already this morning, that Sunak is now saying vote Conservative to avoid a Labour landslide.
Yes.
But he hasn't used the word landslide, he's used supermajority. A parliamentary suit. So he now thinks like Harry, in that they know they've lost it.
Yeah.
It's damage limitation.
Yes.
Now,
but there's nothing positive in their damage limitation. It's all slamming reform or Labour or whatever. There's no positive words coming out of anybody.
No, there aren't. Because if you could point out to me anything positive about anybody in the House of Commons, I'd be very grateful, because I don't see anybody that I deem positive or capable, and they will always fall back on their defensive position. You don't understand, Philip. You don't understand, Keith. You don't understand, Harry. Well, actually, mate, we do understand, because we're the ones at the sharp end when you cock things up.
That's right.
It is as simple as that.
Yeah.
A point that Harry made yesterday, which interested me, and I agree with as usual, was because Starmite is no more a leader than me, right? It'll be Angela Rayner who will be given, no pun intended, a free rein to do whatever she wants.
Yes.
Because Starmite is just a grey man. He just is grey.
Yes.
Absolutely. There's no spark. At least Sunak has a little bit of energy about him. But anyway, God knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, we know what's going to happen. I mean, I had a chap on the door, very pleasant chap, with whom I had a very pleasant chat about our current incumbent MP in Arundel and South Downs, a local man called Andrew Griffiths, just the type of man you would vote for if he had any local interest. Anyway, this chap gave me the leaflet as well, which I read, and it made the very bold assertion on behalf of the Conservatives that there's no point voting for reform because they won't win any seats. Now, if we just pause on that one,
Yes.
they may be right, but what they are scared of is that reform will split the vote. I don't think reform care about winning seats, actually. I mean, they are just the stalking horse.
Yes.
To get rid of this current government. And as Harry puts it, getting some proper old-fashioned Conservatives.
Back
But as
into the
Harry
fold.
says, the price for that is 5 years minimum of Labour. So it's Morton's fork, catch-22, whatever you want to call it, Hobson's choice.
Yes.
But
You know, the fallacy of that argument to me is we know we've got a whole bunch of people in a party that have totally lost the plot. So what do we need? We need new blood and so on and so forth. Oh, don't vote for new blood, because what it'll do is it'll destroy the old blood.
Well, who knows? I mean, again, you're understandably being very discreet about what you're going to do. I don't need to be discreet. Farage and his cronies, sadly, have shot themselves in the foot twice now. And I was persuaded by this chap who spoke to me on the doorstep. And I said, that you're the only one who's actually knocked on my door. And we had a voluntary conversation. He wasn't pulpiting me at all. And I think if I vote, it will be for the local MP already, Andrew Griffiths, because he is local. And used to work on the local policies and issues as highlighted in his pamphlet. And unlike the reform one, he was actually very specific because he has local knowledge. So at the end of the day, although I was tempted to rock the boat, I think I will vote for Andrew Griffith for those reasons. Because, Farage's cronies could well be your wolf in sheep's clothing. So that's my current view. That's
Yes.
if I vote. I don't
I mean,
know yet.
actually, we both actually are very pleased to have Harry on board when it comes to our political analysis, because he's got such a sharp mind. And in that interview yesterday, or our chat yesterday, he made 2 points. That Farage has been tarred with the brush of more or less favouring Putin. He said he didn't say that at all.
No, I know that. You see, Harry has certain hot topics in his mind. They come to the surface in virtually every programme. There is some difference. There is some variation. And if you get him off politics, like when we did the historical one about Normandy and France, and I learned a lot from his historical knowledge.
Yes.
I think, putting it gently, we need to do that a bit more often. Because if you put all of Harry's podcasts together and watch them one after the other, there are probably 4 major topics that he talks about all the time. But yes, he has said the 3rd time now, he's pointed out on Mirador that Farage did not say what they are saying he said. He's never backed Putin. He's never backed the invasion of Ukraine. And he never used the word provoked. But what Farage did do, because of his own hatred of the EU, he at least implicitly, didn't he? Implicitly blamed the EU for expanding eastwards.
For what, sorry?
He blamed the EU for expanding eastwards.
Oh, yes,
towards Russia, Poland, Finland, possibly the Ukraine, had there not been an invasion. So he was blaming the EU for prodding the Russian bear. So you make of that what you will.
Yeah.
But he definitely didn't say that Putin had been provoked.
No.
He did allow his own dislike of the EU to get rather carried away.
Yes.
I'm afraid.
Although in defense of Harry, I mean, over the last 15 years, I've been associated with media that's been looking at the EU, and I've worked in the EU, and I've actually worked for EU organizations peripherally. And it's difficult sometimes to differentiate between what is being done in the name of Europe and what's being done in the name of the EU. Now, there's no question that a lot of the talk in Europe was of Putin has more or less said, look, if you have NATO go into some of the countries where they're not already, that border on the Russian Federation, then I'm going to take it very, very unkindly. And
yes.
In fact, NATO at one stage said, no, don't worry, we wouldn't do that, which of course they have. So you may not use the word provoke, but in my view, in the broad sense of me listening and talking to people over the last 10 years, that's exactly what we've done.
Yes. I'm just pausing because, Poland is in NATO, isn't it?
Yes.
And Finland are now in NATO, aren't they?
I believe that they've just joined, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so being totally objective, with those 2 nation states being right next to Russia, you begin to get the idea that Putin is very worried.
Yes. I mean, in some instances where they haven't joined NATO yet, they do allow NATO exercises. I mean, I remember being in Romania long before Romania became an EU member, and they had NATO soldiers and actually sort of posters showing, Romania should join NATO, that sort of thing. We haven't exactly been docile on this issue.
No, that's a very valid point, Keith, if I may say so.
And on yesterday, Harry made a very good point, because he said he would much prefer to have Trump as president than anybody else. And
no, he said that. He has said that repeatedly, because Trump is a loose cannon. Trump.
That's right. Yeah. And actually, when you think about it, it's not a bad argument.
No, it's not a bad argument. Trump is as lunatic as Korea, China, and Russia. When they deal with Trump, they're dealing with somebody they can't predict.
Yeah, that's right. Is somebody who's in the asylum with them.
So when Trump gets in, we have literally, if the world is an asylum, the lunatics are running it.
Yes.
I mean, of all of them, the leader, ironically, I have the most respect for, and again, Harry has made repeatedly the valid point, you're not there to like your politicians, you're there to respect them if they do a good job.
Yeah.
Well, I think Xi, the Chinese president, is worthy of respect, not for the regime he runs, the persecution of the Uyghurs and all that business. However, he hasn't welcomed Putin with open arms, which is what Putin wants. Because as Harry has pointed out, and I've read elsewhere, Putin is heavily reliant economically on China. And Putin wants to make very close friends with China, as he has with North Korea. Of course, you know, that lunatic in Pyongyang, state visit, you know, ornate ceremonies, military parades, you know, my dear friend Vladimir, but not Xi. Xi has been very cool and in his language, because he knows that if he's overtly welcoming of Putin, the world will be watching. And for all his saber rattling over Taiwan, which he regards as a private matter, he has to be very careful. And I think he deserves a level of respect for that.
I agree with you.
He's also keeping open relations with Europe and America, really very skillfully, is my take on him anyway.
Yes.
So he is somebody worthy of respect. And although it's a totally different regime, to have a leader like him, albeit in a democracy like Britain, would not be a bad thing.
No, you're right. He is quite pragmatic. And actually, it is interesting when you hear these people who will criticize absolutely everything politically, is their criticism of China is, but they make those things with people with a bowl of rice. You don't hear them sort of say they're bristling with tanks and missiles and so on. I don't think the fear of Chinese aggression is anywhere near what it is of Russian aggression.
No, but it's there. Not the aggression, but the military force is there.
Oh, yes, it is.
From what I have read, Xi has increased defense spending, so-called, but let's face it, military spending quite significantly. Because, of course, the other thing he has to keep an eye on is North Korea. Because North and South Korea are still technically at war.
Yes, that's right.
And the Korean War erupted because the Chinese knew that they couldn't have the whole of Korea ruled by a democratic Korea with US help.
Yeah.
Now, you will remember, I don't, but you will remember in some way the Korean War.
Oh, indeed.
And it's a rather a forgotten war, but it was a very nasty war. I mean, sorry, that's a rather infantile way of putting it. No war is not nasty, but it was actually a very nasty war.
Yes. Mind you, it was softened in its image somewhat by Alan Alda and
MASH.
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 Yes.
Yeah. Yes, it was. That could have been a lot more graphic, but it wasn't. I mean, I used to watch that avidly. I don't think I missed an episode. The characters were absolutely hilarious.
Oh, absolutely brilliant! Yeah.
And I mean, long before its time, you know, the cross-dressing medical orderly.
Yes.
You remember the cross-dresser?
Yes.
You know, was it Radar, the little chap with the specs?
Yes, Radar. The chief of staff is in and busy preparing the pub. I think he's listening to our conversation because he remembers. Do you remember MASH?
It was one of my favourites.
It's one of Dec's favourites too.
Absolutely. What I'd like to know is about a week ago I sent Dec an email thanking him for what he does for Mirador and for you. Could you ask him, did he get it?
Did you get an email from Philip?
No, I haven't checked.
No, he didn't get it.
But no, hang on. When did he send it?
About a week ago.
Let me have a look for it.
He's going to have a look for it.
It could be in his junk. It could have gone into junk.
Yeah. He said he gets loads of emails and sometimes doesn't. If he doesn't recognise a name, doesn't necessarily look at it straight away, but he's going to search for it. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I'd just like to know he got it. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. He'll double check. Yeah.
I'm just about to go to the office. So
but actually, did you see the original movie with Donald?
Yes, I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, he died, didn't he? Just a few days ago.
He died. My favourite part ever played by Donald Sutherland was in Kelly's Heroes.
Oh yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It was either Kelly's Heroes or The Dirty Dozen. I can't remember.
I think it was The Dirty Dozen. He was very good too. Yeah.
And he played this sort of hippie-esque tank driver, tank commander.
Yes.
And he would say, "I'm just going to take a break. I'm going to drink some wine and soak up the rays." But yes, he's no longer with us. We all go. Live for the moment, my wife tells me, and I try hard.
Yes.
But
his son is doing quite well in Hollywood, though, isn't he?
Is it Kiefer? It's Kiefer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kiefer Sutherland.
Yes.
Well, he's an actor in his own right, isn't he?
He's what? Sorry.
He is an actor in his own right. Kiefer.
Yes, he is. Yes. I'm sure they use Dad's name as a lot of these children do, but some fail and some succeed, and he succeeded very well.
Well, in fairness, I have read that many don't use the name because they do want to be judged of themselves, and that it can turn people off when you try and play the name card. But who knows? You will know a lot more about North America and Hollywood than I ever will. So there we are.
I doubt it, but it's a funny old game, actually. I don't think there's any real clear rules in Hollywood.
No.
What happens is they react to a given moment. I watched part of the documentary that they made on. Now the name's gone out of my mind just for a moment or two. But it is the other night. I flicked on the television. Just I wasn't looking for anything in particular. But they were showing the movie North by Northwest, which I think is one of Hitchcock's best.
Absolutely. The biplane in the sky.
Yeah.
Cary Grant. Rock Hudson. Cary.
Oh yes, Cary Grant is who played the part, and I always thought very beautiful Eva Marie Saint.
Yes.
Who didn't appear in many movies, and apparently, I mean, this is a sort of atmosphere that they're in. Is she upset Alfred Hitchcock, and he blocked her. And such was his power that she went nowhere after that.
Well, this is the point. It's the old casting couch thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
These male megalomaniac producers and directors were very powerful.
Indeed, they were.
Well, and they still are. I mean, the women still can play, and probably rightly. But I don't think Hitchcock ever chose. He never chose an ugly female star, did he?
No.
Never. There was always eye candy there. But no, I reacted to your North by Northwest because on Radio 3 yesterday, completely out of the blue, they played the music, the soundtrack for North by Northwest, because it was a proper orchestral piece. It wasn't done in those days, as you know. They very rarely made new music in those days. They do now, big time.
Yeah.
But in those days, they would choose existing symphonies. And the weird thing was that the presenter got his wires crossed because he said, this is part of the soundtrack, whatever, for North by Northwest by Alfred Hitchcock. But he said, don't worry, you can go and have a shower. Now, he got it mixed up with Psycho.
Ah, yeah.
And then when the music had finished, obviously somebody had emailed him and said, oi, yeah, you've mixed your metaphors here.
Yeah.
So he had to eat verbal humble pie.
Right.
Because it wasn't Psycho. But there we are. See, this is what happens with radio far more than with television, particularly with, as I say, Radio 3. They are very open to listeners' comments. So you could, I don't, but you can email them, not just generically, you can email the program or the presenter. You can use Twitter, X as it's now called, or all of these things. And if it interests them, I mean, even this morning, the breakfast show in the week is presented by a very good presenter called Petroc Trelawney. Petroc Trelawney was in fact born in Worcester, and all of his names, apart from Petroc and Trelawney, are English, like George and William. But he was brought up in Cornwall from a very, very early age. So he regards himself as a Cornishman. Well, to me, that's a bit of a cheat, because he was actually born in Worcester. However, he's a very good presenter. And what happens is you get the half-hourly news bulletins, and then you get the weather forecast. And what he does is he chooses, obviously he does the 4 capitals, so he does London, Edinburgh, Cardiff, and Belfast. But then he goes all over the place, and he goes to these obscure places. Well, this morning he gave the forecast for this place called Chumley or Charmley. I didn't recognise it, and he said in Cornwall. Well, the next bulletin, he says, "I'm terribly sorry. I've got to apologise profusely because Mrs. So-and-so from Chumley has just been on to say that they're actually in Dorset, not Cornwall. So I'm very, very sorry." So you get this interaction that is quite funny at times. And Lewis gets a mention occasionally. Arundel does. So it's quite educational.
Yes.
As much as informative.
Kit, I didn't see you come in. Kit's here. Come and sit down. Yeah. It's the only one I heard you speaking to Dick. How are you?
Very well.
Come and say hello to Philip.
Philip.
Yeah, we're just.
Good morning, Kit.
Hello.
Good morning. I'm not here to steal your thunder. I was just.
No, that's all right.
I was just taking up some time for Keith.
Oh,
here he is.
Yeah.
Bless him.
Oh yes. Philip, you all right? How is everybody today?
I think we're all very well, thank you, Declan.
Yes. I'm in the process of making 6 coffees.
Well, if I were there, there would be 7.
Right. I put the hanging baskets up once a coffee as well.
Kit, just in case you decide to spit or whatever, you're on air right now, and that's your camera, right?
Yes, well, Keith, I'll love you and leave you both. And will you'll be on tomorrow at some point, Keith, will you?
Yes, I'll be here as usual at 8 o'clock.
Well, enjoy your coffees. Nice to see you, kids.
And you?
When does the grammar school break up?
On Friday the 12th.
Oh, right, the 12th. Not
Friday
long
week.
then. No. Okay, gentlemen and the viewers, if there are any, I'll say goodbye till tomorrow.
Thanks for joining us, Philip. Hi, good morning.
Morning, Keith.
I'm sorry, I don't know how long you've been there.
A minute.
Oh, great.
2 minutes.
I just heard Dec talking to you, but we were actually filling in time waiting for you. So, Can I say the other? I think it must have been a Sunday morning or a Saturday morning or something. I went very, very early to the coffee shop, and there were a very pleasant couple in there getting coffee at the same time. And we started a conversation. It was one of your colleagues in school. I can't remember his name. In fact, I don't think we traded names. But I told him that you were part of us, and he said, "Oh, that's terrific." And I said, "Come up and take a look." And he said, "Well, perhaps what we could do is get a work experience deal going with you." So I'm very open to that. Yeah,
that'd be great.
I don't know what the school code may be about letting kids into the pub, but
oh no, that's perfectly all right. We've had some of the most enjoyable work experience placements of our students have been at places like Harvey's and Longman Brewery, and our former pupils and some of our sixth form pupils are often to be found in the local pubs doing pints. No, it's, very much part of the proper part of the community.
Oh, that's great. Well, I mean, you might think about that, because I'm very open to it, and particularly since one of the things that upsets me slightly, as you well know, is that youngsters tend not to get involved in these sort of things. People laugh when I say, do you want to know the age range of Mirador? It starts off at 88 and stops well short of 50. So that's terrific. I'm very open to that. Right, now let's get to down to the nitty-gritty, because one of the things that and we say at Mirador, you never know when you sit down what the hell we're going to talk about. One of the things that this program has morphed into is from a history of the old grammar school and a history of education to talking about some of the things that are happening and some of the things that you would like to happen. And it's become a fascinating program to people. And each time we talk about something where we haven't quite got time to finish off, and you say, "Oh, I'll go away and take a look at that." So what did you take a look at in the last 2 weeks?
I was thinking about the experience in education from the user's point of view. And I think that's rather more important than we often give it credit for. And that I remember remarking a few sessions ago that I was very pleased to see that absolute downright naked fear had gone from the experience of the great majority of school of pupils and young students. Pretty much gone though, pretty much gone. Unfortunately, the idea of bullying, mostly from their peer group, but not always, sometimes from the adults who are meant to be in charge of them, often unwittingly. I think they apply quite unnecessary and overbearing pressure, which causes them considerable distress and distress. And I still claim that it has largely gone. But actually, what I was going to do, and it's a little bit cheeky, but I was going to ask you for one or two snippets of, without giving you any time to think about it, what do you remember? Maybe a couple of them, your fondest memories from your schooling, and a couple of the less pleasant ones.
Right.
And I'd like to
well, of course, the less pleasant ones tend to stick in your mind rather than, particularly in my first year, when I was 11 in secondary school, and our Latin master was known as Killer Strawn. and he could lose his temper just like that. He only ever verbally abused me, but I remember one instance where, and we were in the very old part of the school. So you went up wooden stairs, and the classroom was over an old arch and so on. And there was a boy called Wells, David Wells, I think, who was quite slight. He's quite a good cricketer, actually, but he was very a slight makeup. And I don't know how he upset Killer, but Killer came down and took a swipe at him. I mean, like that. And Wells, in those days, the desks used to have a metal bar to keep them stable, and you used to put your feet through them. And Wells had put his feet through them, and he couldn't get them out to get out of the way. So he ducked, and we all looked and thought that he'd actually had his head knocked off. I mean, amusing as it's yeah, but I mean, it was horrific. But Strawn was not to be denied, and he actually grabbed him by the coat cuffs and pulled him. And because his feet were stuck in the thing, the desk went with him to the door, and he took part of the door off, and damn near threw him down the stairs in the desk. I mean, that's now we're talking about early 1950s, so we're not exactly talking about it's yeah, no, it's George Brown's School Days time. That was one that I found particularly.
May I comment on that?
Yes.
It is a serious problem, and if one thinks about it, it's quite easy to be very irritated, even to the extent of losing one's temper in one's interaction with anyone, with anyone of any age, and between any age groups in either direction, in all permutations. People do lose their tempers. Younger children especially are very prone to losing their tempers. And often it's because of factors that aren't really to do with the object, as it were, the victim of the temper loss, the person who gets through both barrels when somebody's fuse runs out. It's extremely important, I think, in all the professions which have to deal with people who might be, to some extent, more vulnerable. Medical profession, I expect probably the legal profession, certainly education. It's very important to train oneself to be even-tempered, to control outbursts of temper. Because I think probably it's common experience with everybody who's had to deal with youngsters, parents, other older relatives, teachers. Everybody that has to do with young people, they can be damned annoying, and it's something that's very important, controlling the temper. I don't always succeed, and
but are you ever violent?
No.
See, he was violent, and the term "killer" said it all.
Yeah,
is he was always violent, and he lost his temper.
I mean, I've hit the desk and created a bit of a shockwave, but I don't feel very good about it, and I don't think it achieves anything actually. I think it lessens one's influence and authority.
Yeah. Well, in Killer Strawn's, I can remember the very, very first assembly, and the headmaster read out form masters, and I can remember knowing nothing whatsoever, and it said sort of 5A, Mr. Strawn, and the whole section Oh no! You immediately got the feeling of, hey, there's something about this guy, you know. But the other bad one was we had a semi we were a semi boarding school. We had a boarding section, even though the majority were day boys, and we had one guy called Olcott who was expelled in something like the third year, but he was a natural bully. I mean, a real bully, and he would pick on smaller children. And I can remember that some of us who felt we could stand up to him would say, you know, stop it, Olcott. But that didn't. You can't stop a natural bully because he'll find places to do it where you can't find him. And I was grateful for that he was expelled, actually. But the mere fact that there was still an atmosphere where that sort of bully could exist, I found very unpleasant and very unhappy. So those are my two unhappy experiences.
From your first, when you were introducing us all to this extraordinary character, Killer Strawn, you mentioned the rickety wooden staircase, and I find it rather entertaining, actually, the way that young people, children particularly, the youngest of them all, the young, you know, very early secondary year children, 11 to 13, they're wide-eyed with delight when a building is slightly eccentric, slightly quirky, in slight disrepair. Now, of course, it's absolutely right that dangerous buildings, you know, poor quality concrete and so on, those sorts of problems are tackled as soon as they're diagnosed. Absolutely right. There has to be a safe environment. But I think it's a shame if all eccentricity is designed out of a school environment. I think
I couldn't agree more.
Little corners, not to bully in, but to meet in secret with their little secret friendships and so forth as well. I think children marvelously make the best of their environment and find things to enjoy, which we as case-hardened or cynical adults have forgotten how to do. That's a shame.
I was always thrilled. I mean, old big school went back to something like 17 something. New big school was quite modern, but I loved it when we had the assemblies in old big school. I liked the feeling of gosh, there are people here before us, and that room over the rickety stairs and so on it had cupboards along one side in which previous students had carved their initials, and I can remember we discussed. I wonder how old they were, or what date does that go back to. There was that feeling of continuity that people have been here before you, and so on. No, I agree. When you ask about pleasant things, I think the most pleasant thing, although it was a sort of a strange pleasantness, is I joined the Scouts in my second year, and it took me away, because I quite like sports, but it took me away on a Saturday sometimes from sort of playing rugby or cricket or whatever. But I was fostered to become a Queen's Scout. And as a result, I was nominated to go to the World Jamboree in Canada in 1955, the first one to be held after the war. And I was one of the UK's representatives. And that came as a result of me joining the Scouts in the second form. So it taught me a lot of skills and you know, we had some waste ground in the school, and being in a tent and roasting a rabbit on a Saturday afternoon, when you'd really like to be playing football or something of the sort, is you used to sometimes think, what the hell am I doing here? But the rewards and the results were just so manifest that even, I mean, at 18, when I left school, it's one of the things that I was proud of. The other, strangely enough, was I was not academic, but it was recognized that I could read quite well. And I didn't think that would help me in my later life career, but obviously it did. And in the final, what do we call the day when you prize giving, is I was awarded the Herbert Gerard Prize for scripture reading. And I didn't get anything else, but that warmed the cockle of my heart. And at the time, you sometimes thought, why the hell do they give a prize for scripture reading? And why would anybody? But once again, these things go back into history when they were very important. And the fact that they stayed and that I was recipient of one, it gave me a very, I mean, I remember it now, 70 years later. So those are the two good experiences. Yeah.
Well, if I could comment on your points in Homeric reverse order.
Yes.
I think it's very important, the quality of scripture reading. I'm sure one's all experienced how dead even a passage from the Holy Gospel can sound if it's badly read on Sunday morning. It's extremely important, isn't it? I rather find it a pity that reading aloud isn't valued as much as it ought to be. I think the best literature has an element of sound to it, doesn't it? And I think it ought to be possible to give you an extra layer of appreciation by reading it aloud. On the point you make about your wonderful scouting experience and unexpected trip to Canada, I quite often find myself arguing with colleagues who are discussing pupils who are academic, and they will be trying to dissuade them from taking part in other activities, from being, from carrying on with their almost automatic place in the first 11, or from taking part in the school concert or a production, or going on educational trips. And in my experience, I think the opposite's true. I think it's extremely helpful to every aspect of a young person's development for them to do as much as possible.
Broad corporate, yes, I agree with you. Yeah,
and,
yeah.
The fact that you still very vividly and very fondly remember that experience is a parallel with the experience of all people. After all, we've all been at school and in education and so on. Everybody who's gone through that, who has participated, has got a much richer memory and will have developed a much richer character than the people who simply follow the academic curriculum. And I feel that very strongly indeed. Sorry to slip back to the unpleasant, but one cause for optimism in education. You mentioned the boy who was expelled, who was a nasty piece of work and a habitual bully. It's absolutely useless to pretend that bullying has been stamped out, but it is being tackled. The most encouraging thing I find is that even if the pupils are actually unbeknown to their teachers, sometimes even unbeknown to their parents, if they are victims of bullying, they nowadays can feel very comfortable about calling it out without repercussions. That system has been put in place universally in education in this country, and it's something to be celebrated. It really does. It doesn't stop the bullying. It doesn't mean that some children aren't having a miserable time, but the fact that they can call it out, and that the authorities, the teachers, the leadership team in the school and so on will take it seriously, absolutely will take it seriously, is worth $1 million sent to every individual.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, bullying is just iniquitous. It really is.
Yeah.
Could I? You've raised a very important point, because I sometimes think about these things, but I've never really sat down and discussed them the way that we're discussing now. So I'm finding this fascinating. But the whole school experience, generally speaking, I found more positive than negative, and I think that helped me have some sort of natural tendency to train, because in many organizations that I worked, I've actually set up the training unit. And then I went to Russia and trained from scratch a whole bunch of people in broadcasting and so on. But a direct result of that tendency and the Herbert Gerard Prize is I until very recently, because I can't walk down the aisle now, I read the lesson at St. Michael's, which is the grammar school's church, in a very loose sort of relationship. And so I was able to use this skill and reading aloud. And I agree with you. I love reading aloud, and I love listening to people reading aloud. But there was a lady there who she died about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, who had a speech impediment. And the sad thing is that the bullying nature of adults who should know better came out. And let's try and keep Moira from doing this, and let's keep Moira from doing that. And we had a very progressive priest there for a little while, who said to me, "Keith, do you think that you could teach Moira to read the lesson, because she's so anxious," and so on and so forth? And I said, "Yeah, I think I could," and I did. And I'll give some praise to the bullies. Is the first morning that she did it, and I sat in the front row and sort of coached her.
Yeah.
But they came to me after and said, "We wouldn't have believed that you could have done that." So I was able, because of I won the prize, to pass that on dozens of years later to somebody who equally got such pleasure from it, and who gave pleasure to people who never thought that she could, who only tried to stop her from doing things because it didn't do. So you raised sort of things with me, and in fact, what you made me realize is that from my school education is that there are things that in adult life and much later adult life I was able to pass on, which I wouldn't have had if I hadn't have had that school experience. So yeah, God bless you. It's but I mean, while we were waiting for you to come, I said that you had a very different view of education, which you express on this program, and you do, and I think you're very refreshing, kid, very refreshing indeed. But you certainly evoked all sorts of things in me this morning, and by those simple questions, it's very good.
The question of whether one's experience at school as a whole has been broadly positive, as yours, fortunately for you, as yours was, is very important, very, very important. Lots of people asked a similar question as well as maybe picking on an example of a man akin to your man killer, would also name one or two teachers from whom they benefited, who inspired them to some degree and encouraged them to another degree to go on to learn. And I think the importance of the quality and range of approaches of a teaching staff is very important. I think different styles of approach click with different people, because just because children are children, they are nevertheless all individuals and have very different needs, if you like, to get them to think and to get them to be inquisitive. So that if one has found in one's time at school that several of your teachers, at least, if not the majority, if you're really lucky, most, have in fact inspired you and encouraged you and got you to investigate and to learn, then if there are a few who are not, who not necessarily for reasons of their shortcomings, but because of your relationship with them, that you haven't, as it were, clicked with, and you found it hard, or you've closed the shutters and have not benefited from their attempts to inspire you or get you to investigate. If the whole thing generally is positive, then even in those subjects or areas or experiences where the person in charge of you wasn't particularly inspiring for you, then the overall picture will mean that you've got a positive, you take away a positive view about further education and learning. I don't mean further education in the sense of going to college. I mean carrying on learning, and as you say, feeling that you yourself have got something to give to others to help them. By the way, I hope your previously unpleasant congregants also said well done to the lady who found it difficult to read until you.
Actually, they not totally, because she irritated them in other ways, but they were they accepted her far more. I think she got a very positive feel herself, apart from the fact that the priest also did. But can I ask you this? One of the things about my school is, and it's true still, is it had and has a very, very strong old boys association. It has girls now, but up until about 5 years ago, it was boys. So the old Vesians is very much a male organisation for a while, but it was very, very strong. And I think that actually kept an awareness of the school going. And I went to dinner. It would have been, I tend to say 5 years ago, but it maybe 8 or 10 years ago now. And saw a lot of people that I was at school with that I hadn't seen since. And also, we formed 6 of us. It's in the 5th form, particularly, had a very strong friendship, which we retained over sort of 50 years or so. And once again, it was just before lockdown. They asked me to organise it, but I organised what we called the Great Trek in London, because I belong to a gentleman's club. And as such, we were able to go to various other clubs. So what we did was we all met. They came down to London. I went up to London. And we met at my club. And then we went and paid a quick visit to sort of 6 of the other clubs before finishing off at mine for lunch, and had a wonderful, wonderful day together. and it was the first time really that we've been able to get together. So that also was is a good memory of school and what it did for us. Do you have an old boys, old scholars association?
The old grammar school,
Yeah.
It comes and goes. It depends who's sharing it in any given year as to how how energetic the social committee is and how many events take place. But yes, but even without it, the tendency for former pupils is to, because it's such a lovely part of the country, is to stick around, and a lot of them still live and work within a sensible radius of Lewes. One meets them and they meet each other on a slightly more informal basis. And I think possibly at a slightly less unhealthy, on a slightly less unhealthy level than the likes of Eton. I think the networking that takes place in a school like that is rather important, and people have found employment because another former pupil has been put in touch with him or her, and maybe offered them a job or some training. So that goes on a lot. On a personal level, I always find it very, very pleasant to bump into former pupils. And mostly, I'm ashamed to say, in pubs, but not always. And it's always wonderful to reminisce.
Well, if I may say so, in some ways, you personally are a bit of the thing that runs through the school, because you've been there how many years?
45.
Yes. I mean, when you retire, I'm sure it's going to be a goodbye, Mr. Chips, because everybody talks about kit, and it doesn't matter whether it's the students or it's other members of staff. I mean, you really have been an adhesive force. Are there many other members of staff who've been there a long time?
Yes. Several, and quite a number over 20 years, and several over 30 years. Yes, it's which I think it's rather a good yardstick, isn't it?
Oh, I think so. Yes.
The fact that people want to stay there and find it a comfortable bit.
But I think that's important to the pupils as well.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yes, it's heartbreaking, isn't it, to read about keen students who find that they don't have the same teacher in a subject they want to do well in for 2 terms together, never mind 4 years together, so that they don't get that continuity. And as I was saying earlier, the relationship between the pupil and his or her teacher is very important. And like all relationships, it doesn't just start the moment a supply teacher or a new replacement teacher walks into the classroom. It needs time to go around. And teacher retention is something that really does need to be addressed. It's not just to do with pay. And I know I've mentioned this before, but I strongly believe that it's firmly to do with the non-teaching workload that expected of us, which is, some of it's very important, anything to do with training, connected with the welfare and health and safety issues concerning the protection of the children is extremely important and has to be done. But a lot of it isn't. A lot of the paperwork is onerous, repetitive, unhelpful. It's got to be addressed. It really has. Class sizes are another important one. What
is the average class size now?
It's 30. 33, I think.
Well,
32 or
it
33.
was about that in 1950, so that hasn't improved.
No, but that's an average. It's not uncommon to have classes of 38. Most schools try to not break the 40 barrier, but routinely classes are 30 plus. It's just makes it very difficult, very, very difficult to have any meaningful exchange with each people. Anyway, that sounds a bit gloomy. There's so many good things.
Well, actually, I mean, to be quite honest with you, I think that you painted a picture of a lot of very solid things are in education now. I mean, you've made me feel very buoyant again about schools, and you give me some good memories. Can I tell you one thing that nowadays I'm sure that pupils would actually laugh their heads off. But I can remember as a forgetful young boy going into town and getting into town and realizing it was on a Saturday, so I wasn't going to school, but I got into town and realized that I hadn't put my tie on, and I felt absolutely naked and sort of almost went around like this. Can you imagine that today?
Well, no. I mean, different places have different expectations of uniform and how it should be worn and so on. I was amused by a letter in the Metro yesterday, so it must be true. The mighty Metro published a letter of a woman who was concerned about her grandchildren and the way the bullying culture has shifted from peers to teachers who seem to want to flex their muscles and say, I'm in charge. And she gave anecdotes about her grandchildren being put in detention for being late anyway, even when it was because the bus was late, and also because the girl had rolled her skirt up. And she said, for goodness sake, we were doing this 60 years ago. And that sort of thing, I don't know. Some schools find being, it came to my head, so I'll use it, pernickety about the dress code and uniform and absolute punctuality. They find that very helpful. Some children do. I know some children. I was very grateful to the US Army General at the beginning of lockdown who said, what I recommend, retired, what I recommend is that you make your bed every morning during lockdown. It will really help you, and it has. And he said that's what we expect our troops to do. And it isn't just saying that's because I've told you to. It is actually mentally very, very effective. So being fastidious, maybe as a kinder word rather than pernickety, about uniform can be helpful with some demography, with some populations, some school populations. So yes, but personally, I find that not even a secondary issue. I find it a tertiary issue. I can honestly tell you, I've never raised an objection because a kid's forgotten his tie. It's not. It's really on the scale of things.
Yes.
Really.
No, I mean, I think it can be part of an institution. And to be quite honest with you, I rather thought that the story that I told you was a time thing. It just showed the difference in feelings rather than whether the school was overbearing on uniform and so on. I think one of the things that I think is rather nice about the old grammar school is that your students do still wear a tie, and they still do have a blazer badge, and they obviously feel very comfortable with it. So to me, that's much better than if you want to wear jeans, wear jeans. And I had a culture shock because I went to the University of British Columbia, So I went from a school where I still wore a cap to an organisation where they wore plimsolls and jeans and open shirts and so on. So it was one hell of a culture shock. But it taught you to understand difference in cultures and why and so on, and not being judgmental. Anyway, we've had a good chat this morning. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and in fact, you'll send me through the day with a spring in my step. So we must let Deck get his pub ready, and we're hitting 11:35. So we'll say toodle pip to everybody. Hope you enjoyed the discussion this morning. I most certainly have. And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Yes.
Okay.
So.
Good. Excellent. So we'll play our little sting out. Toodles.